The Origins of Humanity, Part 1. The Celestial Guardians Manifest the Earth Consciousness Experiment. Modern humans have been on planet Earth for approximately 200,000 years. Before we can understand how humans originated on planet Earth, we first need to understand the origins of consciousness in the universe and how that consciousness eventually made its way onto our planet in the form of human beings. I must first say that almost everything you have been taught about the origin of humans is either outright lies, fantasy in the form of mythology, or conflation of both truth and falsehood. What I'm going to present to you here is the full truth of the origins of mankind on Earth as it was shown to me by higher dimensional light beings. This is a compilation of direct verbal communications I've had with ETs and higher dimensional light beings, along with what I personally have seen in my astral travels, and the rest is my own intuition based on objective evidence. You are free to believe or disbelieve however much of this as you choose, but I predict that over time, much of this information will be verified as largely, if not wholly, accurate. If you are able to absorb this information and meditate on it, it will expand your consciousness and bring you closer to your true soul nature. Listen to this and find out for yourself if this information changes you or not. You should not take anyone's word for granted about anything, including mine. Find out for yourself what is the truth and don't let anyone control what you believe. Direct experience is the best teacher. Having said that, to fully understand the origins of human beings, we need to start from the very beginning before Earth was ever created. We need to start with the intergalactic guardians of consciousness. The celestial guardians of consciousness are a group of extremely powerful beings who are responsible for the protection and evolution of all conscious souls in the multiverse. They are the ultimate source of manifestation of all physical planets and civilizations in this universe. One guardian is currently incarnated as a human on this earth. The other guardians are currently in the Temple of Awareness in the 9th dimension, overseeing all of conscious life in this universe. The Temple of Awareness appears to a 3D person who travels there as a megalithic stone circle made of what appears as polished black granite megaliths. Inside the stone circle, aligned with each of the stones, are immense columns of light, each of a different color which rise infinitely into space. Each light has its own color and frequency. In this temple, the guardians of consciousness continually discuss ways to increase the power and strength of consciousness within all souls. Now let's talk about the first planets. The guardians decided that conscious souls needed to experience various levels of physical density in order to increase the power of conscious experience. The first planets for incarnation were the crystal light planets. Conscious souls first took physical form as floating crystalline balls. They lived on planets that were made entirely of crystal. These planets had powerful suns that emitted extremely bright white, nourishing light. The crystal entities absorbed and fed off of the solar energy of their suns. The guardians continued to discuss and create various types of worlds for consciousness to incarnate in and explore. These worlds varied from realms of pure spirit to planets of crystal, water, light, gases, etc. Souls would incarnate on these various planets and realms to learn and experiment with conscious existence based on their desires and their fantasies. Eventually, the guardians decided to form the first civilizations and the planets upon which they would incarnate these souls. Note about the freedom of souls. It is important to understand that all souls are holographic projections of the source, and as such, each soul has complete autonomy over their existence. Each soul has total free will to choose whatever incarnation experience they desire. The guardians do not determine where any soul goes. All souls are free to choose whatever existence they prefer. The guardians work with what we would call spirit guides. Spirit guides work with souls and counsel individuals on what they think they might be good for in terms of experiencing various worlds, and how this would affect their consciousness trajectory. Sometimes souls are counseled against certain worlds for various reasons. For example, many souls would like to come to Earth, but are sometimes counseled against doing so, as they may not be ready for the intense density and harshness of 3D Earth. Sometimes souls would go against their guides' counsel and choose to incarnate on Earth anyway. Oftentimes, this results in stillborns and early infant deaths. When the soul begins to shift down to the intense density of the third dimension, the soul will realize that they are not ready for such an intense and harsh environment, and they will choose to abort their mission. Or, once they are born, the soul will choose to exit the third dimension, and this is what we experience as stillborns and infant deaths. The soul didn't realize what they were getting themselves into. Sometimes they do try to come back to Earth again later, though, and are successful. Now let's talk about the first civilizations. After eons of souls living as crystal entities, the Guardians then decided that souls needed more dense realities to explore in order to grow their consciousness. Eventually, some of these worlds became the intergalactic civilizations we know as the Pleiadian, Arcturian, Andromedan, Sirian, Lyran, and other planetary civilizations. As time went on, souls continued to incarnate on these and other worlds until they found themselves identifying with one world more than the others. We would later call these souls starseeds. So, a Pleiadian starseed, for example, would identify most with their Pleiadian incarnations. These civilizations went through their own evolutions of phases of learning, but they all were created in what we Earthlings would consider higher frequencies. So these civilizations did not experience the level of violence, hatred, and fear, and the feeling of isolation that we experience on Earth. We would consider these planetary civilizations as being more 5D type incarnation experiences. This is important information because current human civilization imagines that these extraterrestrial civilizations exist in the same 3D frequency of Earth. This is why humans currently have the misunderstanding that outside of Earth, there are other violent worlds and warlike extraterrestrial civilizations. This is because humans live in the third dimensional frequency of fear, anger, and violence, and as a result, they project their experience onto other planets and extraterrestrial civilizations. But this is not accurate. Only Earth has this level of lower density frequencies that allows for such emotions like fear, violence, and hate. This will become more clear as we investigate the true history of Earth and our neighboring galactic civilizations. Now let's talk about the Great Consciousness Experiment, the origins of Earth. While these 5D planetary civilizations evolved, souls began yearning for more intense incarnation experiences. The Guardians of Consciousness began discussing different ways to increase the empowerment of souls in various consciousness experiments. It became apparent to the Guardians that they needed a very high-level training simulation for advanced souls to really hone their power of consciousness. Various consciousness experiment planets were discussed. It became apparent that souls could no longer evolve on 5D worlds alone. There needed to be a planet that would be so intense that the soul was forced to discover deeper levels of consciousness just to survive. Various planet environments were experimented with, and there arose a recurring dilemma. If the soul remembered their higher dimensional incarnations, they would easily avoid the limitations of the denser experience, and therefore the soul did not grow sufficiently. However, if the soul was blocked from its 5D past life memories, then the very real danger of becoming trapped in the denser environment became apparent. The denser the planet, the greater the danger of the soul becoming trapped in their own consciousness experiment. A debate raged among the Guardians for millions of years. Some Guardians believed that the risks were too great. If souls became too trapped in their dense consciousness experiment, the damage to their consciousness might be too great. There was also the risk that rogue souls might create damage that went beyond the experiment and endangered the other existing 5D civilizations. The Guardians discussed various safeguards for the denser experiments, but the same dilemma always arose. If there were too many safeguards, the souls would take the easy way out and not learn or grow. And if the safeguards were taken away, then the souls could do themselves and other civilizations very real, perhaps irreparable harm. The Guardians were close to deciding that it was better to err on the side of caution and keep the safeguards in place. However, one of the Guardians decided that there must be a very real risk of catastrophic failure, otherwise souls would simply not grow. If, however, souls were able to, against all odds, find their soul essence inside the unforgiving harshness of the 3D experiment, then souls would grow exponentially. The possibilities for soul enhancement was off the charts, but it would only work if there were no safeguards. The density of the third dimensional experiment had to be very intense, and the souls who participated in the experiment would have to completely forget their higher dimensional existence while they were inside the 3D frequency. The Guardians conceded that the payoffs of such an experiment were undeniable, but also the chance of catastrophic failure was just too great. So, they came up with a solution. The Guardians decided that one of them would have to go down to the 3D experiment as a human for the duration of the entire Earth incarnation experiment. The Guardian who volunteered would have to completely forget their true identity as a guardian of consciousness for thousands of lifetimes, and they would have to forget that they themselves helped to create the entire planetary soul experiment. This Guardian would have to be subject to the same risks as all other souls, but his mere presence on Earth would act as an energetic safeguard, helping influence the rest of the souls on Earth. It was decided one of them would have to volunteer. The Guardian who was the strongest proponent of the dangerous option immediately volunteered to incarnate into the 3D experiment. Others argued that someone else should go so that he could stay in the higher dimensions and help influence Earth from there. But this Guardian was adamant that he should go because it was his idea to take off the guardrails, and therefore it was only fair that he be willing to do what he himself proposed. So it was agreed. The Guardian who came up with the dangerous 3D option would incarnate into the 3D Earth experiment from the very beginning of human existence and continue to reincarnate there until the experiment had concluded. As it happened, the Guardian who volunteered to incarnate in the Earth experiment had a daughter named Gaia. She was an extremely powerful ninth dimensional goddess whose greatest gift was love, nurturing, creativity, and joy. Her guardian father loved to call her his little princess, so the name stuck. He would call her Her Royal Highness the Princess Gaia every time that he saw her. She loved this title and would giggle whenever her father called her his little princess. Her favorite activity was to create new and exciting ways to have pure, unadulterated fun. She spent millions of years conversing with her father about all the different ways to create dimensions of pure joy. She fantasized about creating different kinds of beings. She loved the idea of creating physical worlds to experiment with creating life. When the Guardians created the various planets for soul incarnation, Princess Gaia was an integral part of planning out all the different life forms and plants that would live on each planet. All of the inhabitants of the advanced civilizations knew of Princess Gaia and worshipped her as one of their goddesses. So when the Guardian who proposed the Earth experiment decided to go down and incarnate as a human in the 3D Earth consciousness experiment, Princess Gaia instantly volunteered to be the consciousness to incarnate as planet Earth. The Guardians explained to Princess Gaia that this was a very serious and dangerous experiment. It It was a given that some higher dimensional being would have to inhabit the consciousness of the 3D Earth experiment, and this was a very serious issue to plan out. Whoever decided to be the conscious being who incarnated as this third dimensional planet would have to undergo the same risks as every other soul who incarnated in that experiment. There was a very real chance that Princess Gaia could get trapped in the virtual reality program along with all of the souls on that planet. Additionally, any deity who incarnated as the Earth planet would simultaneously have to protect the consciousness of all living beings on that planet. But additionally, it meant that such a being would also be highly influenced by the collective consciousness of its inhabitants. Since the point of the experiment was to see how dense the conscious frequency of Earth could get while still allowing the soul to grow in awareness, this meant that Princess Gaia would have to work very hard to retain her divine consciousness and still nurture and protect all of the souls whose main purpose was to dive deeper into density in order to grow. This was an extremely dangerous experiment for any deity to undertake. Her father, the celestial guardian, was dead set against the idea of his little daughter risking her purity and consciousness in such an endeavor. The thought of his little girl getting lost in that harsh experiment was unacceptable to him. Princess Gaia, however, loved her father too much to let her beloved father go to Earth alone without her protection. Her father was immovable. He would not allow such a danger to get anywhere near his daughter's purity. However, the other celestial guardians chimed in and explained that Princess Gaia was the most qualified to undertake incarnating as planet Earth. Besides, her father needed someone to watch over him and protect him. There was no being in the multiverse that loved her father more than his precious Princess Gaia. So the rest of the celestial guardians overruled him and decided that Princess Gaia would incarnate as his Mother Earth. When the guardian objected, the rest of the guardians would threaten to cancel the entire project. The only way they would allow this experiment to continue is if Princess Gaia was allowed to incarnate as the planet we know of as Mother Earth. Gaia's father seriously considered canceling the entire project, but his daughter came to him and told him how much she loved and respected the concept he had invented. She explained to him how vitally important it was to the whole multiverse that his experiment in 3D consciousness be executed. She saw that there was no other being in the multiverse that could handle the task he was going to undertake. And being his daughter, she was the only being who was able to help him. She promised him that she would never forget who she was and that she would make sure that if he got trapped in the reincarnation cycle of forgetfulness, that she would make sure to awaken him. She said, "Daddy, you have to do this, and I'm the only one who understands you enough to help you. Besides, I want to grow my full potential on power and awareness. I need you near me to be able to achieve my full potential." When the guardian heard his precious little daughter's words, his heart melted. He knew that this endeavor was the most beautiful gift he could give his little princess, and he understood that without her, he would not be able to fully immerse himself in this experiment and survive. So, little Princess Gaia had won over her father's heart. They would go together into this very powerful and dangerous experiment. When the rest of the Celestial Council of Guardians heard, they were all extremely happy. The third dimensional Earth consciousness experiment was approved. Now they had to work out all the details of how long the experiment should be and prepare necessary safety protocols for the protection of all souls who volunteered for this very special mission. So in order to help 3D Earth souls evolve, it was decided that there should be a recurring cyclical consciousness frequency shift that would allow souls some respite from the intense harshness of the third dimension and also increase their ability for conscious evolution. So the Guardians created what would be known as the Yuga cycles. Over thousands of years, the frequency of Earth would shift in densities. Every 24,000 years, the human race would be able to experience a golden age where souls could express the knowledge and wisdom they had acquired during the previous more dense years. Then, after each successive golden age, the cycle would descend again into more dense frequencies where the soul would have to work harder to awaken their spiritual essence. The cycles were to be as followed. It was determined that there would be a total of 9 Yuga cycles before humans could permanently emerge from the intense density of the lower 3D frequencies. And if you want to learn more, go and watch Origins of Humanity Part 2, How Souls Learn to Become Gods.